Thank you, Rachel. And I wanted to set the agenda here that I'm going to be going through tonight. Um, Even though Rachel already went over it once, really going to be doing it in kind of two sections: a vernal pool overview, and then kind of, I guess, as close as you can get to a vernal pool walk without being there. And mainly that's going to be through pictures. I mean, it's going to be nothing like the experience you would get hopefully next year if you choose to go out one of these walks. But we're going to do our best to at least show you what the types of things are out there that you're going to see, particularly in Striar, and what to expect if you did get to go on one of these walks next year, and hopefully we'll have them next year. And I figure the best way to actually set the tone for a virtual vernal pool walk is just to take a second and, whoops, sorry. And just let that kind of filter in a little bit. This is the sounds that you hear when you're in a vernal pool walk. This particular sound clip is from Striar Conservancy. And the reason I like it is because you're hearing multiple species here. You're obviously hearing the peepers, but in the background you can also hear the wood frogs. And I kind of went out on the internet and looked for a vernal pool sound clip that had both of that in that, and I couldn't find any. So I happen to have this myself, and I stripped off the video from that, and I think it kind of sets the scene. All right, about me. Rachel did some of this already. I'll just go over it one more time. And I guess I should have put, I live in the town of Hanson. Been going out there to Wildlands Trust properties since the 1990s. Adopt a preserve at Striar, and more recently I've been spending a little time over at the Tucker Preserve Indian Head River Trails. They're only about 5 minutes from my house, and it makes it very easy to hop out on my lunch break. I do work from home, so I can run out on my lunch break and get a quick hike in over there. So I've been spending a little bit of time on those preserves. And finally, and most importantly, I am not a trained naturalist. I'm just an enthusiastic amateur. You know, just since I was a kid, just going out into the woods, like I'm sure many, if not all of the people on this call have done. We just have a natural love for the outdoors, and that's kind of how I would categorize myself. Okay, vernal pool general definition. If you go out and try and find a definition of a vernal pool, a standard definition, you're going to have a lot of trouble because they vary all over the place. They vary from federal to state to local, and even sometimes to organizations. So I think a very general term, if you want to think about it, this seemed to be the best way I could come up with common threads for the definitions that I found out there. So you want to think of a vernal pool as it's a temporary or ephemeral body of water that has no permanent inlets or outlets. The source of the water in these is either rainwater, snowmelt, or rising groundwaters. Vernal pools support several species of animals that depend on them for reproduction and survival. And vernal pools do not have permanent fish populations. Now, again, even in the state of Massachusetts, I had a little trouble finding a specific common vernal pool definition. There's a publication out there, I'm sorry, a website out there, Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program website, which you can find if you go out there and search with Google. It's really one of the go-to places for official state of Massachusetts vernal pool information. And from that website, this is really kind of the definition I found to be most useful. And I'll read it. Vernal pools are small, shallow ponds characterized by a lack of fish and by periods of dryness, so they dry out. Vernal pool habitat is extremely important to a variety of wildlife. And the terms obligate and or facultative species, we'll talk a little bit about what those are in a bit, including some amphibians that breed exclusively in vernal pools and other organisms such as fairy shrimp, which spend their entire life cycles confined to the vernal pool habitat. Essentially, if you want to think about it, I just think of it as a puddle out in the woods, really is a good way to think about it. You know, it doesn't have a stream in, a stream out. It's just a puddle that forms in some sort of a depression, and then it fills with water and then attracts and supports a certain number of obligate or facultative species. So we talked about obligate species. These are species of creatures that depend on vernal pools. In other words, if they didn't have vernal pools, their success as a species probably wouldn't last very long. And in Massachusetts, the obligate species tied to vernal pools, as defined by the state of Massachusetts, are the wood frog, the spadefoot toad, mole sanders, and there's actually 4 types of mole salamanders, and something called a fairy shrimp. And we're going to look at each of these. I would mention spadefoot toad. That is nothing I've ever seen at Striar Conservancy, and I don't think, based on my knowledge of the geology of that place, we probably may not ever see a spadefoot toad over there. But the other 3 categories are there at Striar, and we've seen them. So when you talk about vernal pools, there's 2 types. There's something called a certified vernal pool, and then something else called a potential vernal pool, and we'll talk about potential in a bit. But a certified vernal pool, again, that can happen at different levels of government. It can happen at the federal level, state, and even local governments. And in the case of Massachusetts, we're gonna use the following definition for a certified vernal pool. And really all that means is a vernal pool is a pool that has had the required criteria gathered, submitted to, and approved by the NHESP, which is the National Heritage and Endangered Species Program. It's part of Mass Fish and Wildlife. So basically what that means is, and NHESP has all these forms out there that you can go out there and get them, that allow you to go out to a place that you think could be a vernal pool. You can gather evidence of obligate species. They look for things like sound recordings, photos, locations, all of these different criteria that if you meet all of those and submit it, you can get a vernal pool certified. And I want to mention something here. This Mass GIS Oliver, for those of you who aren't familiar, it's a wonderful state run, excuse me, GIS mapping site. It has all kinds of GIS data on it. It's a wonderful site. And on that site, they show you certified and potential vernal pools. And I thought this would be a good place just to kind of point out what that Mass Oliver GIS site looks like. Again, it's a free state website. It has a wide variety of data mapped into GIS format. It includes population data, political, infrastructure, cultural, and they're all on that site. In addition, as I said, conservation and recreation is another, what they would call a layer, and that you can go in and kind of look at layers on that site. Each layer has a different subject. So if you wanted to see vernal pools, the layers that you would look for are right here. And here's an example. If you went to Oliver, it takes a little bit to get used to it. But I think folks would get a kick out of it if you go there. You can kind of really dig into a lot of data. There's property data. As I said, there's political data, but it's this stuff here that we're interested in, and it's a layer under conservation and recreation, natural heritage data, and then there's two different tabs here that you would click: certified vernal pools and potential vernal pools. When you click on those, they would show up here on this map. You'd see little spots that indicated certified pools and potential pools. Very cool site, not just for vernal pool data, but lots of different things you can learn about on that site. It's really neat. All right, so we talked about certified pools, then potential vernal pools. And I was kind of intrigued about this. Potential vernal pools are marked on that GIS site. And I was trying to figure out how do they determine what a potential vernal pool is? And I dug into different sites, and finally what I found was that way back in 2001, the state put together a little project where they went out and did aerial photography across the entire state. And one of the pieces of data that they used that aerial photography for was to identify potential vernal pools. And what they did is they hired analysts. And over here, I found this on the site where they talked about using that aerial photography to come up with the designations of potential vernal pools that are then added to that GIS map that I just told you about. And it's some sort of a little stereoscopic machine. They take the aerial photographs and they're able to look and see what they think are potential vernal pools. So again, it's just what they think could be a vernal pool, but nobody has taken the time to go out there and actually collect the data and submit it to the state to actually get that certification. So I thought that was kind of cool. This is a little video from Striar on what I believe to be a potential vernal pool that is not on that map. And I'll just run this again, just trying to give you a sense of stuff here. It's a beautiful big pool, absolutely no inlet streams and no outlet streams. It's the right depth. It's towards the backside of the Striar Conservancy, and I know I saw egg masses out there. I know it's almost definitely a true vernal pool, but it would have to be certified to get on that map as such. And that was taken last Saturday, that little video. All right, protections conveyed. This is another one. Initially I had lists here, but then they started getting very confusing. But suffice it to say that a certified vernal pool does convey protection, usually from projects, a house building, or a mall coming in. There's all different levels of how those protections are conveyed. And again, like I said, it can be under the federal government, the state government, and they are definitely there. And then the other thing is local protection. And I was a little surprised about this because it does vary from town to town. Some towns have vernal pools defined in their local laws and other towns don't. And for example, the town of Halifax, where Striar is, and I should back this up, this data was from 2004, so things could dramatically have changed since then. But this was from a paper put together by the Pioneer Institute for Public Policy. And it was done for the mass housing industry, kind of as a guide to them, so that when they were building a new development in a town, they had a reference that they could go to understand what the rules are for a particular town as it related to vernal pools. So again, back 2004, Halifax had very little verbiage in their town laws related to vernal pools. And basically, what this group did is they came out and they gave you a yes or a no. Does the municipality have jurisdiction to regulate vernal pools that are not certified by the state? In 2004, they said that Halifax didn't. Now take the town of Hanson, which is the next town over. They have some real in-depth rules in their town bylaws, even to the point where they had their own definition of what a vernal pool was. So really cool, well-defined rules and regulations related to vernal pools and, you know, the types of activities that would kick in those rules, all right there in the town bylaws. So I think the town of Hanson has some very good regulations related to the vernal pools. One more definition, the big night. Again, you've probably heard this term. The definition is different depending on where you go, but the bottom line is, it's the night. It is a night or a couple of nights in the beginning of the spring when the warm nights come, usually with temperatures above 45 degrees, usually with rain. And it's that combination of factors that basically initiates this mass migration of amphibians. I think that's the general way to think of it. They're treated differently all over New England. You'll see some towns up in northern New England, they actually have almost like little festivals for the big night. They'll shut down roads and they'll send people out to these roads and go out there with flashlights and make sure that creatures who are part of this migration are safely getting across the streets. It's a pretty cool thing. And if you ever get to be out there when it truly is one of the big nights, it's a neat thing to see. You've probably, if you've seen the invitations for prior years' walks at Striar, we always try to figure out when the big night's going to be. But as you can see, trying to predict 3 or 4 weeks ahead of time, which is typically when Rachel would try to schedule one of these things, you know, how do you predict a night in 3 weeks' time that's going to be, you know, a combination of these factors? So I remember a couple of years where we tried to do it and it was warm, you know, in early March when Rachel scheduled it, yet we went into these cold spells and we had to keep canceling and rescheduling. And so the bottom line is it's very difficult to pre-schedule one of these hikes on the big night, but, you know, Wildlands Trust tries to get it done. And so that's the big night. Now, we're moving closer to Striar Conservancy, which is where we really want to focus tonight. And I put this map in here just so you can get a reference point to where Striar is. And first of all, it's, for those who aren't familiar with Striar, it's located in Halifax, Mass. It's one of the Wildlands Trust showcase properties, and it's really, I think, got the most certified vernal pools, and it's probably one of the best places to see the vernal pools, I would say, because of the location of the vernal pools. They're going to be very easy to find and get to. So it's really a showcase for vernal pools. We're located right on Route 105 right here, which is Thompson Street. If you're familiar with Great River Preserve, Great River is right here. And this is Cumberland Farms down here, the important bird area, Cumberland Farms. So got a lot of neat features around the area for folks who like to be in the outdoors. It's also bounded by the Winnetoxet River right here. So this is the Winnetoxet, and it empties right into the Taunton River. And then that goes all the way to the Narragansett Bay. So here's the town of Bridgewater. Here is Route 58 and 106. So you get a sense of where it is, maybe a little closer to Route 58 than Bridgewater Center, but That's where Wildlands Trust, Striar Conservancy is located. Now, topography. And here's a little bit of a zoomed in map. Parking lots right here and your main trail. There's a little loop trail out there. Winnetoxet River again, Route 105. It is very flat. The only place that you really see much relief is where the property trails off towards the Winnetoxet River. It's mainly oak, red maple, beech, shagbark, hickory. There's white pine, hemlocks, white cedar, and holly. And there's others. I'm just not a tree expert, so those are the ones that I'm real familiar with. And then I just put this little curious thing in here that ever since I've been going there, I've never been able to figure out this whole thing. But when you get out there, there are no boulders, there are no stones. They just don't, they're not out there. And it's always been something I've tried to understand why that might be. And to take it one step further, I started thinking maybe that's got something or some connection to why maybe there's so many vernal pools here. And I may have found the answer, I'm not sure, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, so topography, geology. This little circle right here is roughly the location of Striar Conservancy, and it's located in this thing called the Narragansett Basin. It's a geological slight depression, and it runs all the way from the Narragansett Bay right through to Scituate right here. And roughly, you could think of this as the Taunton River watershed. Now, that's not exactly accurate because somewhere right around here is where the North-South River watershed starts and heads that way. But in general terms, the Narragansett Basin takes up the Taunton River watershed. And then add on top of that, this thing here. This is a map of something called Glacial Lake Taunton. And the purple circle is, again, roughly where Striar is. I couldn't quite get this map zoomed in appropriately without losing this here. So I had to kind of leave it out wide. But when you look into Glacial Lake Taunton, this was a glacial lake that basically covered the entire area, and it was formed at the end of the last glacial era. It was a lake that the top of which, or the surface, was about 55 to 65 feet above current sea level, and it filled with glacial water. And one of the big things about that lake was huge amounts of fine clay, basically was sedimented to the area. So there are very deep areas of basically gray clay, and it's all sediment from the glacial retreats. I'm going to show you a picture here next. One of the things I wanted to mention here is this description talks about the area specifically that Striar is, and they talk about this last line I found here: the clay deposited within this lake has been mined for making bricks. One interesting thing about Striar is just within a quarter or half a mile of Striar is an old brick mill. And if you've ever been out in Cumberland Farms and walk through some of those fields out there, I think it should come to mind what I'm talking about here, because it is such thick clay, and when you touch it, it's mucky. There's no dirt, there's no stones in it, and you can see how pretty easy it would be to make bricks out of it. It's kind of a cool stuff, although it's very mucky and dirty. And finally, I think this is the last geology slide. This right here, and I didn't show you exactly Striar, but this is Striar where I'm going right here. This is a topographic map. You can see the topographic lines here that show you the relief, the change in altitude of the land. and the colors map over here. So again, it was just another confirmation of what we see in Striar and why we probably see so many vernal pools out there. And if you look at this over here, fine deposits include very fine sand, silt, clay. Doesn't say it here, but it is poor draining soil. And that's what makes up Striar. So if you put all that together, flat, poor draining soil, you've got probably what makes a very good environment to have vernal pools. You've got little depressions, they fill with water, and they're going to take a long time to drain out, if they drain out at all. Probably a lot of the water that leaves the vernal pools at Striar leave through evaporation. So that kind of describes what I think is the reasons, and that's just my opinion from what I've read, why we have so many vernal pools out there. All of that stuff that I just kind of talked about leads me to that conclusion. I'm again not a scientist, but it seems to all make sense. The one other thing I'll point out here is this piece right here. This is artificial fill. If any of you have been out to Striar, this is the dike that is out there. Eventually the trail leads out to this area, and the trail used to go across this dike. It was built as part of, there was an old shingle mill out there, and this was put in as part of the industrial part, or agricultural past for that area. In fact, I believe a road used to run right from Thompson Street over to River Street, and it went over this dike. But this pond behind the dike was a result of this being built here. It used to be a pretty deep pond, I was told by a local, and then Hurricane Bob back in the 90s came through and blew that dike out. And actually, that's really the reason why you can't go over this anymore, because it's just so, it's got a blown out spot, and it's really not safe to cross over that anymore. So this picture, which again I took over the weekend, is just a little demonstration of that clay that I was talking about. Very thin layer of topsoil, and then this clay goes very deep. It's very fine. If you touch it, it's smooth. There's no pebbles in it. It's kind of cool stuff, but it doesn't let water pass through it. Okay, so now we're getting back to Striar and vernal pools and where they're located. Now, this is a screen clip from Oliver. I want to point out that these P's and C's, I actually added them to this map. So if you went to Oliver, you wouldn't see these P's and these C's. I put them there just to kind of give you, so you could see the potential pools and the certified pools at Striar. What you would see on Oliver are actually these little, this is like a blue asterisk, and the potentials are denoted by it's a little blue bullseye in there in the middle. So you see your certified vernal pools. We have 5 of them, and the P's are the potentials. And the potentials are all over the place. I would mention, I think these are way short in terms of really the potential pools at Striar Conservancy. Out in the back portion of the property, there's all kinds of places where I know there's potential vernal pools that are not yet identified on the Mass maps, as well as over here. They're all over the place. And again, if you think about it, the potentials are put on the Mass Oliver maps by, people looking at aerial photographs. Now, there could have been, the tree crowns or the tree cover could block a lot of these vernal pools that are out there that aren't, identified. There's all sorts of reasons why they're not there, but I can tell you that there is tons of them out there that just aren't identified that could be, I'm almost positive, certified. And just so you can see, this is a hand-drawn, my rough estimation of the main trail at Striar Conservancy. So Remember back when I said Striar is a prime place to go and view the vernal pools? This is really why. If you look at this trail, it goes right by your main certified vernal pools. This is right at the front entrance, right by the kiosk. This is just off the trail, vernal pool number 2. And vernal pool number 3, 4, and 5 are right along the trail. They are so easy to get to. It's a real advantage if you're going out there, and if you're leading a group of people out there to see them, because if you're trouncing through the woods out here with 20 people off trail, that's not a very great thing to be doing. But Striar really has the advantage of this trail being so close to these pools. Okay, this picture, I just couldn't get a good picture at night. My camera's not good enough to get good pictures at night. People move, but I think even with the blurriness of it, you get a sense of what these hikes look like. People going out there, everybody's got flashlights on. People are dipping in. There's frogs. You're seeing egg masses. It's a pretty cool thing to take part in. But I'll back up. And I think for the past 3 years, we've done these hikes out there. Eric Boria, who is the stewardship manager at Wildlands Trust, he's been I think at all 3 of them. And then I think 2 years ago, we were lucky enough to have Carlos Fergata, who works for Mass DEP, join us. So if you remember, I said I'm an enthusiastic amateur. Well, Carlos is what you'd call Carlos is the expert. He brought us to a whole new level when Carlos started joining these walks, and he's got all kinds of experience and understands what's going on in the vernal pools, understands the creatures, and it was a real benefit when Carlos started joining these hikes. I think they run roughly 60 to 90 minutes. On these past hikes, we've generally gone to vernal pools, actually all 5 of the vernal pools. And it's kind of fun to go out there at night, something that a lot of people don't have a chance to do very often. A lot of people are very hesitant to go out at night by themselves. And when you have a group, it makes it a lot more enjoyable for folks to be with a group. In addition, I just wanted to mention, and Carlos may mention this later, I think Carlos is on the call. Carlos has also been running a program with the Middleborough 4-H program for kids, and I think Carlos has been going out there for years with the kids in the 4-H club and kind of doing the same type of thing, except it's just during the day. Okay, let's see, we got 10 minutes. I'm going to push a little quick here. So the wood frog, here we go, obligate species. These are, let me think, all pictures taken at Striar Conservancy. Here's the wood frog. This is probably the most abundant of the obligates that you would see out there. And this is the wood frog. And I'm going to give you his sounds. So the quacking sound of the wood frog, they're usually identified with this little mask behind their eye. As I said, they are, sorry, let me shut him down. They are an obligate. And the cool thing about wood frogs is they are very adapted to cold climates. They're the only amphibian found above the Arctic Circle, and they basically they really almost freeze totally. Their hearts will stop, and they don't breathe. They have glycogen production that comes into play and prevents the cells from basically exploding when the temperatures go below freezing. So they're a pretty cool creature. You see a lot of them out there. You see a lot of them in the vernal pools, and you can hear them all over the place out there. If you walked out there tonight, you would hear wood frogs all over the place, especially right near the parking lot. You can hear a bunch off to the, it would be to your left-hand side as you walk through the parking lot. Next guy, spotted salamanders. These are one of the mole salamanders. This picture was taken at Striar. It's an obligate, one of the creatures that you can use to certify a vernal pool. And I don't have any sound because from what I can understand and what I found when I started looking into it is they very rarely vocalize. And I couldn't find any sound recordings for the spotted salamander. Fairy shrimp. This is an obligate, obviously not an amphibian. I wish I had a reference in the photo so you had a rough idea how big that was. I'm guessing, I don't know, maybe it's an inch, maybe. These we have seen and we saw them last year. We saw them back at Vernal Pool 3 or 4. And actually, Rachel sent me this information on fairy shrimp, which is kind of cool. Female fairy shrimp produce several broods of encysted eggs, which dry out and must be resubmerged before they'll hatch. Hatched larvae develop quickly into mature adults, which reproduce several times. Basically, these guys live in the vernal pools. When they dry out, they just go into the leaf litter and kind of stay there. And then when the pools fill up again, more cycles of life begin with the fairy shrimp. And again, that picture was taken out vernal pool number 3, I think. All right, some of the facultative species. Everybody knows the peeper. This picture was taken in vernal pool number 1 last year or the year before. They're all over the place. Again, if you drive into the parking lot, you'll hear the peepers all over the place. I think last year when we did the nighttime walk, I had never seen this before, but it was almost like everybody who was on that walk had peepers crawling on their arms and legs. It was amazing. I'd never seen so many of them coming out and actually visible to people who were out there taking a look at the vernal pool. It was pretty cool. Gray tree frog, facultative species. This guy was out actually near the vernal pools along the trail. They're kind of cool. And back up to the peeper, there are 2 tree frogs in the state of Massachusetts. This is one, and the peeper is another tree frog. 2 tree frogs. Oh, and that's your tree frog. Okay, toad. I don't know if this is an American toad or a Fowler's toad, but there are lots of these guys out there. You'll see them all over the place. They're in the vernal pools. They just kind of float there and look at you. They're kind of cool. Sorry. That guy. Okay, now the next, I guess what we would call the virtual experience. And really the only way I could think to do it was really just to kind of show some photos from a photo gallery. First, a photo gallery of shots just taken generally of Striar, so you can kind of get a sense of what it looks like and what the trails look like. And there's some pictures of the vernal pools themselves. And then the second gallery that we're going to look at is actual shots from vernal pools at Striar Conservancy. And with any luck, this is going to happen. So can you see that, Rachel?
Looks good to me, Rob.
Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we're going to go in and we're going to look at Striar Conservancy photos just to give you a picture of what the place looks like. So this is the main kiosk right off the parking lot. This is where people, like if we have a vernal pool walk, this is kind of where we congregate. The parking lot's over here. The main trail heads in this way. And there's a vernal pool actually right behind this kiosk, and it's one of the loudest vernal pools there. So, you know, even if you didn't want to go into the woods, you could just come into the parking lot, and that vernal pool is right there, and it's got a lot of great stuff to see in there. And this is actually a picture of that vernal pool right behind the kiosk. This was taken at dusk. This is the main trail. Lots of, like I said, white pines, holly trees. Really kind of almost a typical look when you're walking all the way through Striar is what you see right there. In the summer and the late fall, the ferns are spectacular out there. They're all over the place. They just carpet the area. It's a beautiful, beautiful place to see these ferns. This is back towards the middle of the property, and you're looking out towards, this is the Winnetoxet River. So he's heading from east to west, heading towards the Taunton River. So he's going that way. More boardwalks, ferns. This is a swampy area way out on what's called I think we just kind of informally call it the Loop Trail out towards the middle and back of Striar Conservancy. Lots of water runoff, especially in the spring. This right here is a vernal pool. This is right off the trail. I believe it's vernal pool number 3, and this was, you know, coming off of the winter, things were starting to melt. You're starting to see a little bit of water there. And the interesting thing about these back 3 vernal pools, which they're a little different in that they're quite deep as opposed to vernal pool number 1 and vernal pool number 2. Looking towards the Winnetoxet River, again, just to give you a sense of the place, and I always point this out, the fluctuations in water levels at Striar are tremendous. These white lines here are an indication of the high water level, which sometimes can be just days between where it is here and where it is here. But that's how high the water had been recently while I was out there. There's that back pond I talked about. Lots of potential, what I consider potential vernal pools out here, although they are not marked on the map. And this was taken from that dike I talked about. Right there is the vernal pool that I was talking about. Can't really see it well, but that clear spot is a vernal pool. Winter, it's a great place, very scenic, especially after snowfall. And then you get your typical birds out there. Here's a little lovebird that was along the trail while I was out there. I put this in here because we have river otter. And just recently, Eric and I were out there and we were looking at these, trying to figure out what was going on. And they went on for quite a while, and then we finally figured out there were otters doing slides through the snow. Looks like an otter was traveling from one part of the property to another, and that was his best mode of transportation, was to slide across the snow up there. Couple more. This guy, I don't know if is this a video? Nope, it isn't. Sorry about that. This, I used to have a video out there, but here's a river otter. I put a game cam out. This guy came out of the water one night. Very, very soon after he spotted the camera, he took right off. So the video, while it's okay, you just see him coming out of the water, and he kind of looks up and sees the camera and then bolts back into the water. So, but there are another indication of the river otter being out there. Towhee, just out in the back. You hear a lot of them out there. Another ovenbird. Here's a cuckoo. He was a yellow-billed cuckoo out there. Tons of birds. Phoebe, palm warbler. Oh, here, I wanted to show you this guy. Here's another tree frog, which I happened to spot out there one day, just kind of hanging in a tree, right beside the trail, and he made for a good picture. Muskrats. This was a little nest on the ground, some sort of a thrush, and probably a cowbird egg in there. Not positive, but I'm pretty sure that's what that was. And now I'm going to switch back, and we're going to go and look at vernal pools in general at Striar. I know we're at 8 o'clock. I'm going to get to these real quick. Oh.
Well, just a quick plug for your website while you're finding that. This is a public website, everybody. This is Rob's website. They're all his original photographs, and he doesn't sell them. He just said anybody can look at them for free.
Thank you. Okay, so this gallery is vernal pools, and all but a couple pictures here were taken at Striar Conservancy. Some of them are duplicated. We've already seen this one, obviously. So I'm gonna go by this guy here. We saw this one already. This was just a week or two ago. I went out there one night to see if I could collect some data or get some videos, but it was a kind of a quiet night, not much going on. By the way, right here, right behind these trees is Route 105. And the parking lot's right here. So again, you're not really way out into the woods here. This is that shot one night. We were out on the vernal pool walk and just people kind of having kid-like experiences out there. It's kind of a cool thing to see. People get very excited about it. This I'm going to play because this guy, vernal pool number 1, I had gone out there and he had been peeping, so his cheeks were blowing out, and as soon as I got the camera down there, he just stopped doing it, and he just kind of sat there the whole time. But again, you can hear the wood frogs in the background, and you can hear the other peepers, but he just didn't want to play ball when I had the video camera going. All right, you've seen this guy. This is the yellow spotted salamander. They are out there. They reproduce in those vernal pools. More nighttime pictures. So here's Carlos. This was on the 4-H walk it was either May, I think it was May or June. And again, Carlos brings a group of 4-Hers out there, and you can see Eric Boyer here. He's got nets, and very similar to what we do on the night walks. The same things are done on the 4-H daytime walks, gathering samples and looking at them in buckets, and it's pretty cool. It's a fun thing to do. Carlos giving a little more info. You've seen the wood frog. More peepers, again, Striar Conservancy, vernal pool number 1. Here he was about to let go with a peep. Another one. Toad. Here's a wood frog and big spider. Vernal pool number 1, here's your spotted salamander. Here's some fairy shrimp. This was vernal pool number 3 or 4. These are very difficult to see. The thing to look for are these little white points. The ends of their, I'm not sure what you would call these tails, I guess, are always white. They're easy to, they're the things that when you spot them, then you kind of get a better handle on the fact that you've got some fairy shrimp out there. All right, this is spermatophore, and this is a picture that was not taken in Striar. In fact, it was a picture, my wife, Kathy, and my daughter, Maggie, and I were up in the Blue Hills walking the Skyline Trail, and in Quincy, or it might be Milton, along the Skyline Trail, there is a vernal pool, and we happened to walk by there, and I was looking at it, and I spotted the spermatophores. and this is the tip of an oak leaf. And what this is it's deposited by the male yellow spotted salamander. And this yellow cap right here is the sperm. And that's what they do. They deposit them on leaves or twigs or, you know, anything in that vernal pool. And what happens is the females come along and they basically envelop that, and they internalize it, and the sperm then fertilizes their eggs, which they then end up laying in the vernal pool. So that's how, at least in the case of the spotted salamanders, they you know, the fertilization occurs. Here's another picture, that same spermatophore. I, again, wish I had a reference here so you had a good idea how the size of this, but you can see this is an oak leaf, so it's you get a rough idea. Salamander eggs, spotted salamander eggs. Another shot of that wood frog. It was Carlos with Eric in the background. Carlos again doing some more instructions. More spot. I think these are spotted salamander eggs. Another wood frog. These are interesting because the organization I mentioned before, the New England Endangered Species Program, state organization went out, and I think it was 2 years ago, and I think they put 19 different amphibian traps in one of the vernal pools at Striar Conservancy. And they were doing sampling of amphibians out there. I don't know whether they, you know, what the results were from those traps, but they go out there, they put them out there, and then they come out and they do a sampling and record the results, and then they take the traps out. Another little shot of your gray tree frog. There he is again. Getting near the end, another picture of the trap. I'm going to move quickly here because we're running short on time. Another trap in vernal pool number 3 or 4. Gray frog. Another fairy shrimp. Another shot of some eggs. Probably wood frog. Here's the 4-H club out there again with Eric and Carlos last summer. Everybody has a good time, I think, when they're out there doing this stuff. Some little polywogs, that's what I call them, polywogs. I don't know what they are, but they're polywogs. Some little creatures people pulled out of the vernal pool and we're looking at. Frog again, sorry, he's in there all the time. And that's about it. And I'm gonna end it right there. So, let me go back. And I'm going to go back to my original share. Sorry, 1 second, I'm almost there. Do you see that, Rachel? Am I back on?
You're good. You're on.
Okay. All right. So final thoughts. Best practices. So the thing to think about, and especially with Wildlands Trust, Wildlands Trust basically or really does close down at sunset. So, you know, you really don't, unless you're on some sort of a guided tour with Wildlands Trust, you wouldn't want to be out there in the woods after dark. So if you do go to a Wildlands Trust property and you want to look at vernal pools, you'd want to be there before sunset. If you're out there doing vernal pool walks or, you know, examinations, just be very careful where you're stepping. You know, there could be There could be spotted salamanders walking underneath your foot. So always look down before you step, because you don't want to squish one of those guys out there. And finally, handling. If you do handle anything, and I have seen different things about this, but the safest thing to do would be to have some sort of a glove on. Amphibians are very sensitive to chemicals. I have seen official documents at government websites that say, you know, if you're going to handle something with your hands, you should wet it. It should be free from insecticide or nail polish or any kind of a chemical that, you know, the amphibian could absorb through its skin. But the best way to do it is if you had some sort of a, you know, like a vinyl glove on. That would be the best way to protect, you know, amphibians if you did choose to handle any of them. And then in conclusion, and I think Rachel has all of these links. These are all links to things that have been referenced in the talk. The Vernal Pool Certification Form link, the aerial photo survey link. You can get the whole paper on that survey here. Talks about how they did it. Here's Oliver, the Mass Oliver website. If you click on this, this will bring you there, and you'll be able to go in there and fool around with that website. Like I said, it takes a little bit of fooling around with, but you'll get the hang of it. And in conclusion, the last link I wanted to give you, this book is a great little book. I have this, and I use it all the time. It's called The Field Guide to the Animals of Vernal Pools. It's on Mass government website, Mass Wildlife, and the link is right here. It's a really good book. The important thing to remember about this is you can find this on Amazon. Last time I looked, which was earlier this week, it was for sale on Amazon for $34. If you go to the Mass government website, it's $12, and it's a really cool book. It's got, you know, all kinds of pages on all of the species we've been looking at here. It talks about vernal pools, how to certify them, other reptiles and amphibians. If I had to get anything as a guide, this would be the #1 guide I would get. And for $12, you can't beat that deal. And with that, I'm done. And my voice is failing me, and I'm going to take a drink. So I'm going to pass it back to Rachel.
All right, Rob, I'm going to give you a little hand clap there with my reaction. And actually, Rob, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your screen.
I will.
And bring the gallery view back here. And if you have a question, please raise your hand by going to participants and just click on the little hand raise on the bottom there, and I'll be able to see it and call on you. If all goes as planned.
Shy people.
I know. Oh, here we go. All right, Mary, we have you on for a question. You are off mute.
So, Rob, which of the species that you've mentioned would we most likely to be able to spot during the daytime?
If it was one of the obligates, I would say a wood frog. To me, that's what I see the most out there in the middle of the day. If it was one of the facultative, you might see the gray tree frogs. You don't see them very often, but they are out there. But without a doubt, I think wood frog would be #1. I've never seen a yellow spotted salamander in the daytime. In the peepers, my experience with peepers is they are much easier to see at night than they are in the daytime. I don't know why that is, but I can never find them in the daytime. But a lot of times when you're out there at night, you can find a peeper with a flashlight. So I'd say wood frog is the answer, at least my opinion.
I would also welcome people to go out at dusk to preserves, as long as you're not out after dusk and you can find your way back to your car, and that's fine with us. Okay, other questions. Let's see. I know there are some questions in the. Mary, did you have another one?
Yes.
Okay.
What's the difference between obligate and facultative, or did I miss that when I had to get up and get a drink of water?
You may not have. It could be that I didn't explain it well enough, but an obligate absolutely depends on a vernal pool for its reproductive cycle. So, in other words, if the vernal pools weren't there, their chance of success of a species is greatly diminished. Whereas a facultative, like a peeper, a toad, they'll reproduce in a vernal pool, but they're also successful reproducing in other areas.
Thank
The obligate, and the obligates, if they're one of the criteria that you can use to certify a vernal pool. So that's the difference.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised. If anybody has a question and is having trouble with that feature, you can feel free to hop in, unmute yourself, and ask your question. Let's see if there are any other questions in the chat. Oh, someone wanted to know if spotted salamander eggs were damaged by the snow last week since it came so late in the season.
Good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that, and I know Carlos is here, and I don't know if he would know the answer, but Carlos is, he's got a lot of knowledge about it. I would tend to doubt that they would be damaged. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, these creatures, there's always fluctuations this time of year, and I think they would have to be rugged enough to survive that type of variation in what happens, because I mean, I don't think it's anything new that we have warm nights and then cold nights, and in past periods that would have been the case. So I don't think it's anything to do with climate change or anything like that. I would think that they would be rugged enough to survive that.
I chime in?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
Species of salamander that actually hatch out under the ice. So unless it froze solid, I guess they'd be okay.
Cool.
Somebody wants to know if any of the species that we talked about tonight are endangered.
Does anybody know? Is that what you said?
Somebody was asking if we know if any of the species we talked about are endangered.
I do not think any of them are. I know some of the mole salamanders are. They're a species of concern, but the yellow spotted is not one of them. So if we happen to be in an area where I think it's the Jeffersons, the blue spotted, and the marbled, I think. Some of those are species of special concern, which is not quite endangered, but they don't range down into the area that Striar is, only the yellow spotted.
Rob, I want to comment on that. That's
Sure.
right. Yeah, those cages are out there to monitor species of special concern or more rare. I could tell you what they are, but I'd have to kill you then. So.
All right. Let's see. X out of the chat. Do we have any other hands up? Last call for questions. Well, you have Rob here, you have Carlos here, you have me. I won't pretend to know anything that I don't know though. All right, well, I want to thank you all for joining. We had 50 people on the call tonight, and this is our first virtual program for Wildlands Trust. This is the way that we're going to be bringing you programs at least this spring. We'll see how long that lasts, but we're just so happy that you all joined us tonight. We're thankful and grateful for your support. Very, very, very grateful to Rob for putting this together for us and agreeing to go out on a limb and take on this new technology with me and bring you this program tonight. 2 weeks from tonight, we have Wayne Peterson, and it will be the same style as this program. He'll be talking about southeastern migrating birds. Southeastern Massachusetts, sorry, migrating birds. So basically birds that are coming through this time of year that you can see from your home or from a Wildlands Trust trail or wherever it is that you're spending your time these days. So you don't have to travel very far. So we're looking forward to that. These programs do fill at a certain point, so I encourage you to register if you're planning on joining us. Otherwise, if you don't get in, like I said, we're recording them, so hopefully that goes well. We'll be able to share these on our website later on. And then the last one in this series will be a talk on mosquitoes and ticks with our entomologist for the county, Blake Dinius. I really encourage you to come to that talk. Blake's a great presenter, and for some reason, people usually don't want to come out and learn about ticks and mosquitoes with Blake. It's hard to get participation, but very, very important for your protection, and he actually makes the talk really fun and interesting. So I encourage you to come. I hope to see your faces again this year. And I would just invite anybody everyone to jump off mute. If anyone wants to say anything or have any questions, we can let chaos ensue now. And if you need to leave the meeting now, that's fine too. So I'll say goodnight and thank you, and I'll stick around for a few minutes. Thank you so much, Rob.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Thank you all.
Thank you.